I watched my sister's manicured hand hover over my social security card, her smile so sweet it could rot teeth. "You're absolutely sure?" Rachel asked, though her fingers were already closing around it. "I just need to rebuild my credit after the divorce. 6 months, tops." I smiled back, feeling the weight of 34 years of memories that hadn't happened yet pressing against my skull. "Of course, what's mine is yours, right? That's what family does." The lies tasted like honey this time. In my first life, they'd tasted like ash. She tucked my social security card into her Kate Spade wallet, the one I'd bought her for Christmas with money I didn't have, and squeezed my hand. "You're the best sister anyone could ask for. I don't know what I'd do without you." I knew exactly what she'd do without me. She'd find someone else to destroy. But that wasn't going to happen this time. The migraine had started the morning of my 34th birthday 3 months ago. Not unusual, I'd had them my whole life, but this one was different. This one came with memories that weren't mine. Except they were mine. Just from a life I hadn't lived yet. I remembered dying at 41, alone in a studio apartment that smelled like mildew and failure. My credit destroyed, my name mud, unable to get a job better than night shift at a gas station because every background check came back flagged. I remembered the collection calls, the lawsuits, the endless grinding poverty that came from having your identity tied to someone else's greed. I remembered my sister's face when I confronted her 6 years from now, would have been 6 years from now, about the credit cards, the car loans, the personal loans from predatory lenders who didn't ask too many questions. How she'd looked at me with those same warm brown eyes and said, "I don't know what you're talking about. You must have done this yourself and forgot. Have you considered therapy?" I remembered our mother taking her side. Of course she did. Rachel was the golden child, the successful one, the one who married well until she didn't, and had the big house until she lost it, and the perfect life until it all came crashing down and she needed someone to cushion her fall. That someone had been me. I remembered the IRS investigation that came too late, after most of the damage was done. How they'd found the fraud but couldn't definitively prove who'd committed it. My signature on some documents, her handwriting on others, purchases made with cards registered to my SSN but delivered to her address. The paper trail was deliberately tangled, and by the time investigators started unraveling it, I was already ruined. Rachel got off with a fine she never paid and bankruptcy that wiped her slate clean. I got a destroyed life I couldn't rebuild, but that was then. Or would have been then. Or, fuck, time travel gives you a headache even when you've already got one. The point was, this time I knew what was coming. This time, I was ready. The first thing I did was document everything. When Rachel called me crying about her divorce, right on schedule 3 weeks after my 34th birthday, I recorded the conversation. When she asked to stay with me while she got back on her feet, I said yes and installed cameras in every room of my apartment except the bathroom. When she started receiving mail at my address, I photographed every envelope before steaming them open, scanning the contents, and carefully resealing them. I created a cloud storage account under a fake name and uploaded everything. Dates, times, witnesses, paper trails. Every interaction with Rachel went into the archive. In my first life, I'd been naive. I'd trusted her because she was family. I'd believed her when she said she just needed help, just needed time, just needed one more thing, and then she'd be fine. This time I knew the truth. Rachel didn't need help. She needed a victim, and I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. The key was patience. In my first life, I hadn't known what she was doing until it was too late. The credit cards appeared on my report one by one, mysterious charges I assumed were mistakes or fraud by strangers. By the time I connected them to Rachel, she'd racked up over $200,000 in debt across my name, and the paper trail was so convoluted that proving it was impossible. This time I was going to hand her the shovel and watch her dig. "The thing is," Rachel said over wine 3 months into her stay with me, "I'm just so tired of starting over. I gave Mark everything in that marriage. Everything. And now I'm supposed to rebuild from nothing?" We were sitting on my worn-out couch. She'd complained about it exactly twice before seeming to realize that complaining about your free housing wasn't a good look, and she was on her third glass of Pinot Grigio. I'd stopped at one. I needed to stay sharp. "It's not fair," I agreed, pouring her a fourth glass. "You deserve better." "I do." She took a long sip, her eyes getting that slightly glassy look that meant she was about to ask for something. You know what would really help? If I could get a credit card. Just a small one, but my credit is so trashed from the divorce that nobody will approve me. Here it comes. Could you? She bit her lip, the picture of reluctance. Could you maybe co-sign for me? Just a small limit, like $2,000? I'll pay it off completely, I promise. I just need something to start building back up. In my first life, I'd said yes. I'd co-signed, and she'd maxed it out in 3 weeks and never made a payment. When I'd asked about it, she'd cried and said she'd lost her job, a lie, and promised to take care of it soon, another lie. This time, I shook my head slowly. I don't think that's a good idea, Rach. My credit isn't great either, and if something happens, nothing will happen. She set down her wine glass hard enough that it sloshed. God, I'm not going to screw you over. I'm your sister. I know. I let myself look uncertain, torn. What if I gave you my social security number? You could apply for cards on your own, build credit that way. I'd help you, but it wouldn't be connected to me officially. I watched the calculation happen behind her eyes. She'd wanted me to co-sign so there'd be plausible deniability. Oh, we were both on the account. It's complicated. Maybe I got confused about whose card was whose. But this was even better. Clean credit using my identity, with no official connection to me at all. I couldn't ask you to do that, she said, but her pupils had dilated. She was already counting the money. You're not asking, I'm offering. I squeezed her hand. You're my sister. I want to help. She protested for exactly 45 seconds more before reluctantly accepting. I gave her my social security card the next morning, and then I went to work. The beautiful thing about knowing the future is that you can prepare for it. In my first life, I'd been blindsided by every disaster. Rachel's fraud, the debt collection, the lawsuits, the IRS investigation. They'd all come at me like waves, each one knocking me down before I could recover from the last. This time, I was building a bunker. First, I filed a fraud alert with all 3 credit bureaus, explaining that I suspected my identity might be compromised and requesting that any new credit applications in my name be verified with me directly via phone. I used my work number, which I controlled completely. When the credit card companies called to verify, and they would, because Rachel would apply for cards within days, I had a script ready. Yes, I'm applying for that card, I'd say, injecting just the right amount of excitement into my voice. My sister Rachel Jenkins is handling the paperwork for me because I've been so busy with work. Can she complete the application? She's staying at my address temporarily. Permission granted, documented, time-stamped. Second, I opened a separate bank account at a credit union Rachel didn't know about and started funneling money into it. Every paycheck, I deposited the bare minimum into my regular account, just enough to cover my half of the bills and look normal, and the rest went into my secret nest egg. Rachel never asked about my finances directly, but I could see her watching, calculating how much she could take before I'd notice. Third, and most important, I hired a forensic accountant. His name was Martin Reese, and he'd been recommended by a lawyer I'd consulted under the guise of getting my affairs in order. Martin was in his 60s, spoke with a mild Boston accent, and had the kind of eyes that could spot fraud from space. He'd worked for the IRS for 30 years before going private. Let me make sure I understand, he said during our first meeting in a coffee shop far enough from my apartment that Rachel would never stumble across us. You believe your sister is going to commit identity theft against you, and you want to let her? I want her to hang herself with the rope I give her, I said. I caught myself. I've seen what she's capable of. She's done this before to other people. She's careful, and she knows how to muddy the water enough that proving it is nearly impossible. Martin studied me over his wire-rimmed glasses. So you're setting a trap. I'm creating an accurate, time-stamped, thoroughly documented record of fraud in progress. And when the time comes, I want to make sure the right people are looking at the right evidence. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not a nice smile, but the smile of someone who'd spent 30 years watching criminals think they were smarter than the system. "I'll need a retainer," he said, "and detailed records of everything, every transaction, every document, every conversation. Can you do that?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the encrypted cloud drive. 6 folders, each meticulously organized: communications, financial documents, video evidence, authentication records, timeline, witnesses. Martin's smile widened. "Ms. Patterson," he said, "I think we're going to get along just fine." Rachel got her first credit card in my name 6 days after I gave her my social security number. Capital One, 3,000 limit. She told me it was for emergencies only and she'd barely use it. She maxed it out in 11 days. I watched it happen in real time through the credit monitoring app on my phone. $247 at Nordstrom, $584 at a spa in the wealthy part of town, $1,200 at an electronics store, a new laptop I discovered later to replace the one she'd accidentally spilled wine on. Small purchases for groceries and gas and meals out, adding up like water dripping into a bucket. She never mentioned any of it to me. I documented everything. Screenshots of the transactions, photos of the shopping bags she brought home, carefully hidden in her room but visible to my strategically placed cameras. Recordings of her phone calls to friends where she bragged about her little shopping spree. "Does she know?" one friend asked on a call I'd captured when Rachel thought I was at work. "God, no, she's so trusting it's almost sad." Rachel laughed, that tinkling sound she used when she wanted to seem charming. "She thinks I'm using it for groceries and gas." Meanwhile, I finally replaced that awful purse I've been carrying. 2 weeks later, she applied for another card. Chase, 5,000 limit. Then Discover, $4,000. Then American Express, $10,000. The credit card companies called to verify each one, and each time I gave my permission with well-practiced enthusiasm. "Yes, that's me applying. Yes, my sister can handle the details. Yes, that address is correct." Every permission recorded. Every recording uploaded to the cloud with timestamps and geolocation data. Martin reviewed the evidence weekly. "She's accelerating," he noted during our 4th meeting. "In my experience, fraudsters start slow to test the waters, but once they realize they're not going to get caught, they get greedy." "How long until we have enough?" "For what? To prove fraud?" He gestured at the tablet between us, showing Rachel's spending patterns. "We already have enough." "But you said you wanted her to hang herself completely. For that, we need to wait until she's in so deep that there's no way out. No plea bargains, no sympathy from prosecutors, no way to claim it was a misunderstanding." "How deep?" $100,000 minimum, preferably more. And we need her to make specific, provable lies to investigators. The cover-up is always worse than the crime. I thought about my first life, about dying alone with nothing, about Rachel walking away from my ruin with barely a scratch. "Then we wait," I said. It took 8 months for Rachel to hit $150,000 in debt across my identity. 8 months of watching her live a lifestyle she couldn't afford on credit she'd stolen. 8 months of designer handbags and spa days and weekend trips to wine country with friends who thought she was doing so well after the divorce. 8 months of her coming home to my apartment, which she still hadn't offered to pay rent for, and complaining about how hard it was to rebuild her life. The thing that made it almost unbearable wasn't the fraud itself. It was the performance. Rachel was so good at playing the victim. When our mother called, which she did weekly to check on her poor baby girl, Rachel would tear up talking about how hard everything was, how she was barely getting by, how grateful she was that I was letting her stay with me. "Your sister is a saint," Mom told me during one of these calls after Rachel had handed the phone over. "I hope you know how lucky she is to have you." "I'm lucky to have her too," I said, and meant it in a way Mom would never understand. Because every tear Rachel cried, every sympathetic look from our mother, every moment of performance, it was all evidence. It showed premeditation. It showed she knew exactly what she was doing. In my first life, Rachel had claimed confusion, Stress from the divorce, memory problems from medication. She'd painted herself as a victim of circumstance who'd gotten tangled up in financial mistakes she didn't fully understand. This time, she couldn't claim confusion. Not when I had recordings of her bragging about her spending. Not when I had video of her carefully hiding shopping bags from me. Not when I had documented proof that she knew these were credit cards in my name, not hers. The thing is, Martin explained during one of our meetings, fraud cases often come down to intent. Did the person know what they were doing was wrong? Your sister is going to have a very hard time claiming she didn't understand that using someone else's social security number to open credit accounts was illegal. Especially when I gave her permission, I added. Martin's eyebrows rose. That's the interesting part. You did give her permission, which muddies the water, except you documented giving that permission, which shows you knew what was happening. A good defense attorney might try to argue that you were complicit. But I wasn't using the cards. Exactly. And you can prove you weren't using them. Separate bank accounts, no purchases traced to you, alibi for when major purchases were made. You gave her enough rope to hang herself, but you made sure none of it could loop back around your neck. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Here's what's going to happen. When the IRS gets involved, and they will, because she's not reporting the spending as income and she's not making payments, they're going to investigate both of you. They're going to see the cards in your name and assume you either used them or were complicit. That's when you produce your evidence. And then they're going to realize they have the most thoroughly documented case of identity theft fraud in recent history, complete with recordings of the perpetrator admitting to the crime and mocking the victim. He smiled that sharp smile again. Your sister is going to prison, Ms. Patterson, and you're going to walk away clean. The IRS letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, almost exactly 1 year after I'd given Rachel my social security number. I found it in the mail when I got home from work, that distinctive envelope with the Department of Treasury seal. My heart kicked against my ribs, even though I'd been expecting it, even though this was part of the plan. Rachel was home, lounging on my couch with her laptop, the one she'd bought with my stolen credit, watching something on Netflix. Hey, I said, keeping my voice casual. Got something from the IRS? Her head snapped up so fast I heard her neck crack. What? I made a show of opening the envelope, reading the letter with confused concern. They want to audit me? Something about unreported income and suspicious credit activity? I looked at her, letting worry show on my face. I don't understand. I report everything. I don't even have any credit cards except my debit card. Rachel's face had gone white. Let me see that. I handed it over, watching her eyes dart across the text. The letter was polite but firm. They'd noticed unusual credit activity associated with my social security number, significant spending that didn't correlate with my reported income, and they wanted to discuss it. An investigator would be contacting me to schedule an interview. This is a mistake, Rachel said, but her voice was thin. It has to be a mistake. Maybe someone stole my identity, I suggested, all innocence. I've heard about that happening. Should I call them? No, she caught herself, forced a smile. Let me look into this first. Have a friend who works in finance. Maybe it's just a computer error or something. Don't panic, okay? I let her take the letter. Let her think she had time to fix this, to cover her tracks, to come up with a story. I'd already sent Martin a copy of the letter that morning. He'd been expecting it too. Rachel went into damage control mode. Over the next week, I watched her scramble through my cameras. She went through my mail, my documents, my computer when she thought I wasn't looking. She was trying to figure out what the IRS knew, what I knew, how bad this was. She called someone, a lawyer maybe, or another victim she'd cultivated, and I recorded every word. It's fine, she said, pacing my living room at 2 a.m. when she thought I was asleep. She doesn't know anything. She thinks it's identity theft by a stranger. I need to make sure certain things disappear before anyone starts asking too many questions. She started shredding documents. Credit card statements that came to my address, applications, receipts. I let her think she was being clever while my cameras captured everything. She tried to pay down some of the debt, $3,000 here, $5,000 there, using money from God knows where. Probably another fraud scheme. It didn't matter. The damage was done and the paper trail was permanent. 3 weeks after the first letter, a second one arrived. This time for Rachel, sent to my address because that's where she'd been living. I wasn't home when she got it, but my cameras were. The way her hands shook as she opened it was almost satisfying. Almost enough, but not quite. This letter was less polite. The IRS had questions about her finances, specifically where she'd gotten the money for her lifestyle over the past year when she had no reported income. They wanted bank statements, credit card statements, documentation of all spending. They wanted to interview her, and they'd copied the FBI. That's when Rachel's mask started to crack. "You have to help me." Rachel came into my room at midnight, her face blotchy from crying, still clutching the IRS letter. I'd been pretending to sleep, but I sat up and turned on the light, blinking like I was confused. "Rach, what's wrong?" "The IRS, they're investigating me. They think I've been committing fraud." She was shaking. "But I haven't. I mean, I've had some financial troubles, but that's not illegal. You'll tell them, right? You'll explain that I've been staying here, that you've been helping me?" "Of course," I said immediately. "But what kind of fraud? What are they investigating?" She hesitated, calculating. I could see her trying to figure out how much to tell me, how much I might already know. "Identity theft. They think I've been using someone else's social security number to open credit accounts." "Oh my God." I pressed a hand to my mouth. "That's serious. Did you?" "No, of course not." The lie came so easily to her. "It's a mistake. It has to be. Maybe someone used my information and now they think it was me." "Wait." I held up a hand, a horrible thought occurring to me, playing this perfectly. "Rachel, my social security number, the one I gave you, did you use it?" Silence. "Did you use it?" I repeated, letting my voice rise. "Tell me you didn't use my social security number to open credit cards." She swallowed hard, and thus, "I only applied for a few, small ones. I was going to pay them off before you ever knew." "How many?" 3 or 4, how many?" "I don't know, maybe 10. She was crying now, real tears. "But it's fine, I was handling it, and then the IRS started investigating and everything got complicated." I stared at her like she'd stabbed me, which, in my first life, she essentially had. "You used my identity to commit fraud. You've been living in my house, eating my food, and you've been destroying my credit this entire time?" "It's not like that. Get out." "What?" "Get out of my apartment." I stood up, pointing at the door. "Get out right now." "You can't throw me out. I have nowhere to go." "You should have thought of that before you committed felony fraud using my identity." I was yelling now, and it felt good. In my first life, I'd never gotten to yell at her. I'd been too broken, too beaten down. This time, I had righteousness and truth on my side, and I wielded them like weapons. "Get out." She left that night, throwing her things into garbage bags and calling me every name she could think of through her tears. She swore she'd fix it, that she'd make it right, that I was overreacting. I locked the door behind her and smiled. Now came the fun part. The IRS investigator's name was Sarah Chen, and she was exactly as thorough as I'd hoped. She called me 2 days after I'd thrown Rachel out to schedule an interview. I went into the IRS office in downtown San Francisco on a Tuesday morning, dressed in my most professional but slightly worn clothes, the image of someone who lived modestly and played by the rules. Agent Chen was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie in the book. She sat across from me in a gray interview room with a manila folder that I knew contained my entire financial life. "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Patterson. I know this is stressful." "I just want to clear this up," I said, letting my voice shake slightly. "I don't understand what's happening. You're being investigated for potential tax fraud and identity theft. Specifically, there are multiple credit accounts opened in your name over the past year with over $150,000 in charges. None of this was reported as income on your tax returns. Because it's not my income, I leaned forward, desperate and earnest. I didn't open those accounts. I gave my sister my social security number to help her rebuild her credit after her divorce, and she told me she'd only use it for small things, that she'd pay everything back. Agent Chen's expression didn't change. You gave your sister permission to use your social security number to open credit accounts? Yes. That's illegal, Miss Patterson. I know that now. I covered my face with my hands. I didn't know it then. She said she just needed help, that her credit was ruined from the divorce, that she'd be responsible. She's my sister. I trusted her. So you knowingly allowed her to commit fraud? I didn't think it was fraud. I thought I was helping her. I stopped, took a breath. I thought it would be like co-signing, but less official. I didn't realize she was going to open so many accounts, or spend so much, or never pay anything back. Agent Chen made a note. Did you benefit from any of these purchases? No. Are you sure? Because if we find evidence that you did, I didn't. I met her eyes. I can prove it. That got her attention. How? I pulled a thumb drive from my purse. I have documentation. Bank statements showing my income and spending. You'll see it doesn't match the credit card charges. Photos and videos of my sister with the merchandise she bought. Recordings of her admitting what she did. Everything. Agent Chen stared at the thumb drive like it might bite her. You recorded your sister? I got suspicious about 2 months in when packages started arriving at my address for her, but the credit card statements never showed up. I started documenting everything. I pushed the drive across the table. I didn't know who else to report it to. She's my sister. I didn't want to believe she'd do this to me. Agent Chen picked up the thumb drive carefully. I'm going to need to verify all of this. Please do. I have more, a full archive in cloud storage, maintained by a forensic accountant I hired. I'll give you access to everything. For the first time, Agent Chen's professional mask cracked slightly. Her eyebrows rose. You hired a forensic accountant? I wanted to make sure I documented everything correctly. I've never been investigated before. I didn't want to make mistakes. She studied me for a long moment. Most people in your situation would have just claimed ignorance. I'm not ignorant. I made a stupid mistake trusting my sister with my social security number. But I didn't commit fraud, and I can prove it. The investigation kicked into high gear after that. Agent Chen and her team spent 3 weeks going through my evidence. They interviewed me 4 more times, each session longer than the last. They wanted to know everything. When I'd given Rachel my SSN, what she'd said, what I'd suspected, why I'd documented everything instead of going to the police. I didn't think the police would believe me, I explained during the 3rd interview. It was my social security number on the accounts. I'd given her permission to use it. From the outside, it would look like I was complicit. I needed proof that I wasn't. So, you set a trap, Agent Chen said. I protected myself, I corrected. There's a difference. Meanwhile, they were interviewing Rachel. I wasn't in those sessions, but Martin, who'd officially come on board as my consultant, paid for by my secret savings account, kept me updated. She's claiming you were in on it, he told me during a meeting at a cafe near the IRS building. Says you knew about all the accounts, that you approved every purchase, that you're only turning on her now because you got caught. Can she prove that? She's trying, but she can't explain why none of the purchases trace back to you. Can't explain the recordings of her admitting to fraud. Can't explain why she was hiding shopping bags from you in your own apartment. He smiled. Her lawyer's having a very bad time. Good. There's something else. Martin's expression turned serious. The FBI got involved. They're looking at this as part of a larger identity theft investigation. Turns out your sister has done this before. That made me pause. Before me? Before you in this timeline, yes. They found evidence that she used her ex-husband's identity during their divorce. Took out loans, opened credit cards, all in his name. He reported it, but she'd covered her tracks well enough that it couldn't be proven. The investigation was dropped due to insufficient evidence. But now they have evidence. Now they have your evidence, which is making them take a fresh look at her ex's case. If they can connect the two, she's not just looking at fraud charges. She's looking at a pattern of behavior. Repeat offender. That's federal prison time. I thought about my first life, about dying alone, about Rachel's face when she told me it was my own fault for being so trusting. How much prison time? I asked. Minimum 10 years, probably more with enhancements for the dollar amount and repeat offenses. She'll be in her late 40s when she gets out with a felony record and destroyed credit. He paused. Everything she did to you. Poetic, I said. The indictment came down 4 months after the initial IRS letter. Rachel Jenkins was charged with 18 counts of identity theft, 15 counts of wire fraud, 8 counts of mail fraud, and 12 counts of making false statements to federal investigators. The dollar amount was just over $200,000 when they included her ex-husband's case, which they had reopened with evidence from my documentation. Each count carried a maximum sentence of 20 years. I was listed as a witness for the prosecution. Rachel's lawyer tried to fight it, tried to claim I was complicit, that I'd given permission, that I'd known what was happening. But every time they made that argument, the prosecution produced another recording, another document, another piece of evidence that showed Rachel had known exactly what she was doing and had deliberately hidden it from me. The defense tried to get my evidence thrown out, claimed I'd recorded Rachel without her knowledge, that it was illegal. The judge disagreed. California is a two-party consent state for recordings, but there are exceptions for documenting crimes in progress, especially when one party is the victim. And I'd been documenting a crime being committed against me in my own home. Everything was admissible. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 6 hours over 2 days. Rachel's lawyer tried to paint me as a schemer, someone who'd set up her own sister to take a fall. Isn't it true that you hired a forensic accountant before the IRS investigation began? He demanded. Yes, I said calmly. I hired him to help me document the fraud being committed against me. But you gave your sister permission to use your social security number. I made a mistake. I trusted her. When I realized what she was actually doing, I started documenting it so I could prove I wasn't involved. And it never occurred to you to simply report her to the authorities? She's my sister. I wanted to believe she'd stop, that she'd fix it. By the time I realized she wouldn't, I needed proof that I wasn't complicit. I looked at the jury. I was protecting myself from exactly this. People assuming I was involved just because I'd tried to help her. The prosecution's closing argument was devastating. They played the recordings of Rachel bragging about her spending, showed the jury photos of her with designer handbags bought on my credit, walked them through the paper trail of deliberate fraud, the lies to investigators, the attempts to destroy evidence. Rachel Jenkins is a predator, the prosecutor said. She targets people who love her, who trust her, and she destroys them. She did it to her ex-husband. She did it to her sister, and she would have gotten away with it if her sister hadn't been smart enough to protect herself. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Rachel was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. I wasn't there for the sentencing, didn't need to be. Martin attended and sent me a text. It's done. I was at work when I got the message, sitting in my cubicle at the insurance company where I'd worked since college. The same job I'd had in my first life, the same job I would have kept in this life if I hadn't been destroyed by Rachel's fraud. I looked at the text for a long moment, then deleted it and went back to my spreadsheet. That night, I went home to my apartment, no longer contaminated by Rachel's presence, and opened a bottle of wine. Not the cheap stuff Rachel used to drink on my dime. Something nice. Something I'd bought with money from my secret savings account, which now held over $40,000. I'd been saving everything I could for the past year, preparing for the aftermath, preparing to rebuild whatever Rachel destroyed. But she hadn't destroyed anything this time. This time, she'd destroyed herself. My phone rang. Mom. I considered not answering, but curiosity won. Hello? How could you? Mom's voice was thick with tears and rage. How could you do this to your sister? You set her up. You trapped her. You ruined her life. She ruined her own life, I said calmly. She committed fraud. She stole from me. All I did was document it. She was trying to rebuild after the divorce. She needed help, and you turned her in like she was a criminal. She is a criminal, Mom. She committed felony fraud. She would have destroyed my credit, my life, my future. You gave her your social security number. And she abused that trust. She opened 15 credit cards in my name and ran up $150,000 in debt. She never intended to pay any of it back. She was going to let me take the fall for all of it. I took a sip of wine. Did you know she did the same thing to her ex-husband? This wasn't a mistake. It's what she does. Silence on the other end. Then, I'll never forgive you for this. I know, I said. I'm okay with that. She hung up. I blocked her number and poured myself another glass of wine. The thing about Rebirth that nobody tells you is that it's lonely. I'd saved myself. I'd protected my future, preserved my credit, ensured I wouldn't die alone and broken at 41. But I'd done it by cutting out half my family and documenting every moment of my sister's betrayal. I didn't regret it, but I felt the weight of it. Some nights I'd lie awake thinking about my first life, about the version of me who died in that studio apartment. She hadn't known what was coming. She'd trusted Rachel right up until the end, believed that family meant something. I knew better now. Martin called me a week after the sentencing. The IRS cleared you of all charges. Your credit report will be amended to remove the fraudulent accounts. You should be back to your normal credit score within 90 days. And Rachel? She'll be eligible for parole in 10 years if she behaves herself. Likely she'll serve 12. He paused. Her ex-husband wants to thank you. Your evidence helped them reopen his case. He's getting restitution. Good. There's one more thing. Martin's voice took on a different tone. The FBI wants to talk to you about consulting. Consulting on what? Identity theft cases. Specifically, how to document fraud in progress. Apparently, your evidence archive is being used as a training example for investigators. They want to know if you'd be willing to help develop protocols for victims to protect themselves. I thought about that. Thought about other people in my situation, other victims of family fraud who didn't know how to protect themselves. People who trusted the wrong person and paid the price. I'd be willing to talk to them, I said. It's been 3 years since Rachel's sentencing. I got promoted twice at work, moved to a nicer apartment in a better neighborhood, started dating someone I met at a coffee shop, someone kind who doesn't have any siblings and whose parents are safely retired in Arizona. I haven't spoken to my mother since she called me the night Rachel was sentenced. She writes sometimes, emails I don't open. Rachel writes too, from prison. Long letters about how sorry she is, how she's changed, how she hopes I can forgive her someday. I throw them away unread. The FBI consulting turned into something semi-regular. Once a month, I go in and talk to investigators about documentation strategies, about how to build evidence that will stand up in court. They pay me well for it, and the work is satisfying in a way my regular job isn't. I'm helping people protect themselves. People who trusted the wrong person, who got taken advantage of by family or friends or partners who saw them as marks instead of people. Sometimes I wonder what my first life would think of me now. That version of me was so trusting, so naive. She died believing that Rachel's betrayal was somehow her fault, that if she'd been smarter or more careful, it wouldn't have happened. But it wasn't her fault, it was Rachel's. And this time, Rachel paid the price. Last week, I got a letter from Rachel's parole officer. Rachel was coming up for her first parole hearing, and I was listed as a victim who could submit a statement. I wrote 3 pages, single-spaced. I detailed every lie, every manipulation, every moment of betrayal. I included documentation of her attempts to contact me from prison, to manipulate me into supporting her parole. I explained that she was a predator who targeted people who loved her, and that releasing her early would put other potential victims at risk. I ended with, Rachel Jenkins destroyed my life once. I won't let her do it again. Not to me and not to anyone else. The parole board denied her application. She has to serve at least 8 more years. On the 5-year anniversary of the day, I gave Rachel my social security number. I threw a party. Not a big one. Just me, my partner Alex, a few friends from work, and Martin, who'd become something like a friend over the years. "What are we celebrating?" one of my coworkers asked, looking around my apartment. The nice apartment, the one with the good neighborhood and the working dishwasher and the view of the bay. "Survival," I said, raising my glass, and making good choices. "Cryptic," she laughed, but she raised her glass anyway. Martin caught my eye across the room and smiled. He knew what we were really celebrating. He'd been there for all of it. The investigation, the trial, the aftermath. He knew what I'd done, what I'd sacrificed, what I'd gained. Later, after everyone else had left, Martin stayed to help clean up. "You ever regret it?" he asked, packing leftover food into containers. "The way you handled it?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "No. Not even a little?" "Not even a little." I dried a wine glass, held it up to check for spots. "She made her choices. I just made sure she faced the consequences. Most people wouldn't have had the stomach for it. The planning, the patience, the willingness to watch her dig herself deeper. Most people didn't die once already because of her." Martin paused, giving me an odd look. I'd never told him about the rebirth. How could I? But sometimes I slipped, said things that didn't quite make sense if this was my first time through. "Figure of speech," I amended quickly. "Most people haven't been destroyed by someone they trusted completely." "No," he agreed slowly. "I suppose they haven't." After he left, I sat on my couch, my nice couch, purchased with money I'd earned and saved legitimately, and thought about both my lives. In my first life, I'd died at 41, broken and alone. In this life, I was 39, successful and stable. I had a career trajectory that would lead to senior management. I had a partner who loved me. I had friends who respected me. I had money in the bank and excellent credit and a future that belonged to me, all because I'd been given a second chance, all because I'd chosen revenge over mercy. I didn't feel guilty about that choice. Rachel had never shown me mercy. She'd used me, betrayed me, destroyed me, and never lost a moment's sleep over it. This time, she was the one who couldn't sleep. She was the one in a cell, counting down the years until she might be free. And I was here, in my nice apartment, living the life she'd tried to steal. Justice, I thought, pouring myself a final glass of wine. This is what justice tastes like. Rachel was released after serving 12 years of her 15-year sentence. I know because the victim notification system sent me an email. "Rachel Jenkins has been released from federal custody," it said, along with information about restraining orders and victim resources. I read the email 3 times, then deleted it. She was 51 now. I was 46. A lifetime had passed, or at least it felt like one. I didn't think she'd try to contact me. The restraining order I'd gotten after the trial was permanent, and violating it would send her back to prison. But just in case, I kept my documentation archive. Every recording, every photo, every piece of evidence that had put her away. Insurance. Martin had retired 2 years ago, but he called me when he heard about her release. "You doing okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. And I was. Rachel's release didn't scare me. If anything, I felt nothing. She was irrelevant to my life now, a footnote in my history, a problem I'd solved years ago. Good, but if anything happens, I'll call, I promise. I didn't hear from Rachel directly, but I heard through mutual acquaintances, people who didn't know the full story, who still thought of her as the golden child fallen on hard times, that She was struggling. Convicted felons can't get decent jobs, can't rent decent apartments, can't get credit, can't rebuild their lives. She was working night shift. At a gas station, I heard. Living in a studio apartment that smelled like mildew, just like I had in my first life. The irony was not lost on me. 5 years after Rachel's release, I published a book, Trusting the Wrong Person, a guide to protecting yourself from family fraud. It detailed my story, anonymized, legally vetted, but true in all the ways that mattered. How I'd been betrayed, how I'd documented it, how I'd protected myself. The book included practical advice for other victims, how to recognize the warning signs, how to document fraud, how to work with investigators. It became a bestseller. I did interviews on podcasts and morning shows. I spoke at conferences for fraud investigators and victim advocates. I became, weirdly, something of an expert on family fraud. People asked me all the time if I'd forgiven my sister. I always gave the same answer. Forgiveness is for people who've earned it. She hasn't. Sometimes interviewers pushed back. But she's your sister. Don't you think family deserves a second chance? She had her chance, I'd say. She used it to steal from me. I don't owe her another one. The book made enough money that I was able to quit my insurance job and write full-time. I bought a house, a real house, with a yard and a mortgage in my name only. Alex and I got married in the backyard, surrounded by friends who'd earned their place in my life. Mom wasn't invited. Neither was Rachel. I sent them both copies of my book, though, return address included. Neither of them ever responded. I'm 53 now. Rachel would be 58. I don't know where she is or what she's doing, and I don't particularly care. Sometimes people ask me if I ever think about reaching out, about reconciliation. Life's too short for grudges, they say. Family is family. But I remember my first life. I remember dying at 41 with nothing, destroyed by the person who should have protected me. And I know that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is cut out the people who hurt you, even if they're family, especially if they're family. I protected myself. I built a good life from the ashes of what Rachel tried to take from me. I helped hundreds of other people do the same through my book and consulting work. I have no regrets. The email came on a Tuesday morning in spring. Subject line, from Rachel. I almost deleted it without opening. Restraining order or no restraining order, I didn't owe her my attention. But curiosity won, the way it always does. The email was short. I'm dying, cancer, 6 months, maybe less. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation. I know I don't deserve either. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything. I was a predator. I did destroy people who loved me. I spent 12 years in prison and another 10 in my own personal prison of poverty and isolation, and I deserved every minute of it. You were smarter than me, stronger. You saved yourself when I tried to drag you down. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm impressed by what you became. I hope your life is everything mine wasn't. Rachel. I read it 3 times. Then I deleted it and went back to work on my 3rd book. If she was telling the truth about the cancer, she'd be dead in 6 months. If she was lying, well, it wouldn't be the first time, and it didn't matter either way. She was right about one thing. My life was everything hers wasn't, and I'd earned every bit of it. Rachel died 8 months later. I know because the obituary was sent to me by an old family friend who thought I should know. I'm sure you'll want to attend the service, the message said. I didn't respond. I didn't attend. I did open a bottle of wine that night. The expensive stuff. The kind I'd bought with money from my book royalties. And I toasted to the version of me who died at 41 in my first life. We made it, I said to the empty room. We survived. And then I went to bed, in my house, next to my partner, and slept the dreamless sleep of someone who'd won. Epilogue. 10 years after Rachel's death, I received a letter from her ex-husband. His name was Mark, and I'd never met him, but he'd been there in the courtroom during Rachel's trial, sitting in the gallery, watching his own nightmare be validated through my testimony. The letter was handwritten, careful. Dear Ms. Patterson, I don't know if you remember me. I was married to your sister for 6 years. She destroyed my credit, my reputation, and very nearly my life. When you came forward with your evidence and they reopened my case, you gave me my life back. I wanted to thank you, not just for the restitution, though that mattered, but for proving I wasn't crazy. For years, people told me I must have been mistaken, that maybe I'd made those charges and forgotten. that maybe the divorce stress had confused me. Your documentation proved Rachel did to me exactly what she tried to do to you. You saved yourself, but you also saved me retroactively. I'll never forget that. I've rebuilt my life. I remarried 3 years ago to a wonderful woman who's nothing like Rachel. We have a daughter now. I'm happy. I hope you are too. With gratitude, Mark. I read the letter twice, then put it in a folder with all my other documentation. Everything from that year, preserved as evidence that I'd done the right thing. That night, Alex asked me why I still kept all the files. Because, I said, I need to remember that protecting yourself isn't selfish, that cutting off toxic people, even family, isn't cruel, that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. You were never a victim, Alex said. You were always a survivor. In one life, I was a victim, I corrected. In this one, I chose to be a survivor. Alex gave me a look that suggested they thought I was being overly dramatic. But they kissed me anyway and went back to reading, and I sat there in my home office, surrounded by evidence of my own survival, and thought about second chances. Some people don't deserve them, but I did, and I'd made the most of mine. Final note, they ask me sometimes the people I consult for whether it was worth it. The year of documentation, the stress of the investigation, the loss of my family. I always say yes. Because in my first life, I lost everything and gained nothing. In this life, I lost people who never really loved me and gained a life worth living. That's not revenge, that's justice. And justice, it turns out, tastes like expensive wine in a home you bought with money you earned, surrounded by people who actually deserve your trust. It tastes like freedom. And I'll take that over family any day.